My name is Ramirez. You can call me Frogbear or Rami. Um, so today, this video is going to be about what I've learned so far about cybernetics. Um, this is just research I've done with watching podcasts, me looking for my own documentation to see what I can find as primary sources, and a bunch of other material that I've watched priorhand too. So I guess for me, this started with looking into not IBM, but understanding American corporations' effects on, let's say, World War II. Because I read a really great book called Nazi Spy Rings in America. And it led me to understand that to some degree, there were negligence. There were negligence decisions that were made on world leaders here in the United States that essentially allowed certain politicians to get blackmailed by whatever equivalent CIA apparatus the Nazis were using in order to blackmail certain American politicians. That is one of the ways that they largely facilitated a deal in order to come to America. Through that, I knew that there were, me personally, I'm pretty sure that there's already somebody out there who made that connection. But I felt like there was more there. So that leads into Edwin Black and me looking into IBM's dealings with the computer system that they developed in order to catalog people in Germany. And what I found was the fact that it wasn't just the fact that IBM let them borrow machines, but IBM facilitated each and every single move that they made. And they were months in advance, right? So they would show up to these areas, catalog everybody, put them on these nice little notes. So when the Nazis came by and they were like, all right, we need to find out who's who and who's what. Are they a gypsy? Are they this? Are they that? And they started basically cataloging what they considered undesirables and cataloging the desirables. And they would catalog so far as to know your job, and they would know as far back as, I think, 3 or 4 generations. But that's not the point. For me, looking into IBM, understanding that aspect of things, learning about how they facilitated the war. What was it? I can't remember how the word Jamaica study or cross. They called it the Jamaica study. In reality, it was the race crossing Jamaica something. At least that's how it's written in the documentation. And so I found some documentation on the Jamaica study recently. But through understanding the Jamaica study, by the way, if you type that out, like, you actually have to specifically type out the name of the laboratory, you have to type out the name of the people, and you have to type out the name of the government contract that was given to these people in order to find any meaningful research in this, right? Which is already very difficult. And it's so funny how Google facilitates making this very difficult for people. But that was just the Jamaica study, right? And understanding what was their intent, what was their goal there, right? Because that was the first place that IBM kind of facilitated the ERO office, the eugenics record office in New York City, or New York State, either way. So moving forward from that, I knew that they had a technology with a goal in mind, right? And not only did they repeat it in Jamaica, they repeated it in South Africa. From there, I knew I was onto something, but I wasn't thinking of the bigger timeline. I wasn't thinking of, how do I say this? The timeline is important because you figure out, like, all right, if they'd made this attempt here, it didn't work out too well for them, but yet the technology that they developed from the Jamaica study, from the South Africa study, that technology never went away. Instead, right, when the ERO office closed was in 1939. I don't know what year World War II started, but keep that in mind, because there was already a Nazi scientist working on the behalf of the Josiah Macy Foundation that was already working alongside Churchill's cousin in order to push forward this new thing that they wanted to research, right? Which is why I think it's hilarious that the Josiah Macy Foundation then later sponsored the Cybernetics event. So let me get into cybernetics. By the time I got here in cybernetics, I realized this is a very unique event because cybernetics, essentially, the goal of the place was to gather all of the best minds in their respective fields, and they had them talking about specific subjects. Now, what I found very interesting from a video I put down below in the description is called sense making, which is an aspect of cybernetics. It's only one slice of the pie. It's not the whole slice. But he himself, I guess he considers himself a bit of an enthusiast in this field because he knows a lot, and I mean a lot. Like, his actual grandfather is Norbert Wiener, who was essentially the guy that laid the foundation for what cybernetics is. But he mentions that Wiener had a problem. Wiener was a Jew, but the problem was he grew up on orthodoxy. Like, he might have been Jewish in religion, but all of the material that he grew up with was written by orthodoxy believers, like, authors who were Orthodox. So he himself grew up in an orthodoxy environment that he didn't want to believe that the human soul was programmable. And I guess that was his downfall because the guy who does that presentation mentions that that's why all of his other fellow cyberneticians threw him under the bus, because they knew what they were dealing with. Great quote, because they knew what they were dealing with. And in reality, what they were dealing with was the very early conceptions of programming human minds, human souls. Because essentially what they ended up discovering was that it's almost like they discovered a cognitive human behavioral science, but it never went that far. It never went as far as to being labeled How to Program Humans 101. Because by the time that whole notion came around and they kind of figured out the science behind how would we program human beings, by the time that all got around, all of that got classified. And none of these concepts were fully, what do I say? They weren't fully, not thought out, but they weren't fully implemented into being real experiments until the 1950s, or towards the middle of the 1950s and on, because they all have a center point. All of these foundations, all of these laboratories, all of these universities, all of the actors, all of these people that were participating in the development of what we call, what I'm going to call cybernetics, there was one thing that connects all of them. And what's even funnier was the fact that I was on C-SPAN's website, and I was just scrolling through C-SPAN's website, and a video called my attention, called the Plutonium Files. Well, I've made a whole video about Plutonium Files, and in that video, something that I discovered was the Atomic Energy Commission Board. Now, I don't know if anyone else has made this connection, but the Atomic Energy Commission Board, there are these semi-annual reports that just exist on the internet. I found them. I don't know why, but how did I find it? I was looking at two specific foundations that were funding MK Ultra programs, and there's proof of this. There's proof that the Macy's Foundation also was providing funding for some of these experiments, and it was the Macy's Foundation that largely took LSD and initially created the prompt of what happens when we give people this experimental drug. And I guess it was Macy's Foundation that first introduced it at the Cybernetics event. So they clearly have, like, that's the smoking gun, right? If anything gives you leniency to seeing how cybernetics connects to MK Ultra, I think the initial program was called the QK Hilltop, and there is a sort of like a letter that is being written from an admiral to somebody else saying that because another program has decided to take the helm of this research, this program will be closed, and that's Hilltop was the program that was closed, and MK Ultra was the program that was started. But it was the Macy's Foundation that even prior, before any of that happened, in like 52 or 53, that was when the Macy's Foundation got their hands on the chemist that created LSD, creating the prompt in order to be discussed amongst everyone else who gathers for these cybernetic events. Absolutely crazy, the fact that all of this centers around the Atomic Energy Commission Board, which, for those who don't know and didn't pay attention, that was the purpose of Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, when he created that whole investigative body to figure out how many Americans were secretly experimented on, he did so on the behalf of the plutonium files. He didn't actually, all of those documents were released on the O.J. Simpson court. Like the day the O.J. Simpson trial ended was the day that all of those files were also released. I still haven't found them yet. I'm still looking for them. But in some of these semi-annual reports that were coming out from the Atomic Energy Commission, they don't necessarily mention what they're doing, right? It's just like an index. So you get like an A through Z, and you can find out what foundations were involved in the Atomic Energy Commission Board. They don't tell you. They have page numbers, they have references, but I still haven't found the material that it's referencing. I only know what foundations were involved, and you got all the big players. You got Rockefeller, you got Kellogg, you got the Carnegies, you got the Josiah Macy's Foundation. You have the, I can't pronounce this German last name, Gleichlicher or something Foundation. Then you have the Human Ecology Study Board, which is a CIA front foundation, which is fucking hilarious to me. Just discovering all of this in sequential order was very interesting, because essentially I found the connecting dot that revolves around not just MK Ultra but the plutonium files is the Atomic Energy Commission. Essentially, all of the human experiments that Americans were put through were all under the guise of the Atomic Energy Commission. I have a variety of different sources for that, but I'm still disseminating what's the best source to use as a primary source, because I'm not, you know what I mean, what constitute as a primary source in this situation, right? I don't know. We have plenty of people who write books on MK Ultra. We have plenty of people who write books on the eugenics movement, but nobody, in my opinion, has linked these two yet, because in reality, the eugenics movement was just them trying to figure out how to create good breed stock, which led them to figuring out that form of thinking the original eugenicists had wasn't with it. Like, they didn't have the wherewithal to understand the human psychological aspect of things. That didn't come around until, or the human behavioral side of things, that didn't come around until cybernetics. One of the most terrifying stories that I've seen so far was a man called Jose Delgado, where he would insert an electrical device and prod it in the brains of not just people but animals, and he would click the button to see what would happen. And it's kind of where this all initially starts, with electroshock therapy and aspects of this. But the people who were very interested in electroshock therapy were the Josiah Macy's Foundation. And that comes from their annual report from 2012 that I found. Very interesting. I'm still disseminating a lot of this information, but the next video that I'm about to make is going to show you an example of why this is terrifying. The videos are included in the description below in their entirety, because great material. These two videos are distinct in what they're talking about, but they both relate. if you look at the science of what cybernetics is, you cannot separate these two ideas, because essentially, what I think was discovered at these cybernetic events were the systems of how to program people, not through electric shock therapy or through any of these other means. In reality, what I think they discovered was how to organically create an environment that will organically program you with certain conditions in mind, using the natural world before you. That'll be the next video. So thanks for watching. Hopefully I described aspects of cybernetics, of at least what I've discovered. And of course, this discussion will keep going on and moving forward. Thanks for watching. My name is Ramirez.